Wow. Thank you, Howard. Thank you for that wonderful opening. I hope you didn't overshoot it because it's a high bar to go. But really am pleased, honored, and thrilled to be back and to see so many familiar faces. I left in March of 2001, and it feels like yesterday, but not really. But when we keep looking at each other and we're going, we didn't change that much. And then I look in the mirror and I go, oh yeah, we did. Yeah. Oh well, but that doesn't matter. On the inside, we still recognize each other. We're still friends. We're still doing this journey together, aren't we? And so today, what I want to talk to you about is something that is very clear to me, what is needed in our world. And what I think we as spiritual beings and people on the journey to uncover more and more of our love, more and more of the Christedness in us, wherever we are on that spectrum, we're called higher because these are very important times. We're here by divine calling and by divine timing. You're not here by accident. You're not still here because you don't have something else to do. You have something to bring. And you're going to hear what that is today in the ways in which you can do it as you. And so what I'm going to start with is to talk a little bit about how the times in which we live are so polarized and divisive, that it just seems that it's so hard to find common ground. And there's a difficulty, I think, at times for us even to have relationships endure in these times of struggle and challenge and disagreement and misunderstanding and judgment and stereotyping. And so I'm referring to a very well-known parable of Jesus, one of his top 5, I would say for sure. It's called the Good Samaritan. He has some lessons in there that are sort of subtextual, not necessarily perhaps the way you've always thought of this parable. It's in the 10th chapter of Luke. It says, on one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? What is written in the law? Jesus asked. How do you read it? He answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself. You've answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this and you will live. But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus another question. And who is my neighbor? He asked. In reply, Jesus said this. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by him on the other side of the road. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was. And when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, took care of him, and the next day took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said, look after him. And when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you have. So Jesus asked, which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. The conundrum for the first century Jews who heard this parable from Jesus, who were listening, were more complicated than you might think. Because it is more than just a story about what they would consider to be holy men, the Levite and the priest, who were bound by Jewish law to remain in a purified state. In other words, the roles that they played were unique and important, and they had to stay purified, which means they could not come in contact with a number of things, but least of all, blood. They could not touch blood. They couldn't have blood on them. And if they did, they would have to go through rituals of purification for at least 7 days, sometimes longer, in order to be able to resume their duties. And so it would be completely rational and understandable for them to go on the other side of the street. But I'll tell you where the struggle was with these guys, was that a Samaritan turns out to be the good guy. And in fact, sounds like Jesus even sort of makes him a hero. Now, what you need to know about Samaritans and Jews in the time of Jesus was that they had a long-standing agreement not to like each other. They had a long-standing agreement that they were completely opposite in their understanding of how to honor God, because they had come after the split of the kingdom of King David and Solomon, when the kingdom split into the northern kingdom, and when it was restored, actually, as it wasn't actually restored, but another story. But anyway, they continued to evolve, and Samaria chose to honor God at the top of the mountain, that a very special holy mountain would be the place that they would worship God. Their altar was there. While the Jews in Jerusalem continued in the form of the Second Temple and went and followed all of the rigors that were all part of the Torah and part of their tradition. And so these two different places for worship completely split them and completely made them incommunicado. They didn't speak, they didn't talk to each other, they didn't eat, they didn't like each other. In fact, lower than the low. Samaritans were worse. You know how this is. If you have someone who's raised up with you or trained in the same way that you were, who were enlightened and were beneficiaries of the information or the truth that you believe and that you know, and then they diss it and they go do something else, or they start to go in an opposite direction, don't you find that just a little sort of in your face, a little bit? You know, it's like it's discounting something that you believe and that you value, and you doubly are upset with them over somebody who's never been exposed to it, because how could they know? They don't know better until they have been trained up, taught, or part of it. But somebody who knew and still doesn't, that's a harder pill to swallow, isn't it? So that's how the Samaritans were. And for the Samaritan to render aid in such a generous and overwhelming way gave them pause. Because now it was putting into place a question mark in their minds that they might not have had before. That following the Torah and following the laws of purification, where does that fall in terms of being a good person, of doing the right thing? And how is it that someone who is clearly not following the laws as I understand it and worshiping on a mountaintop could be the one who does the thing that somehow stirs our hearts, something we recognize deep below our rational minds? This is the right thing. This is the good thing. How could that person do that? The prejudice about who is worthy and who is good, rationalizations, judgments, stereotypes, these are part of our human conditions. We think we understand people. We think we know who's the good ones and who are the bad ones, who are the evil ones even. Evil is a big word that we hear thrown around a lot. People are evil thoughts. I would say that what we really are lacking is not a definition for how separate we are, but actually a way for us to get back out of our rational thought, out of our words, and back into our hearts, back into our humanity, back into our common interests, back into the places that really matter. Who's worthy? Who's good? And what, as spiritual beings, is our responsibility? We see the Samaritan chose compassion over his rationalization. You see, the Samaritan was traveling on a very busy highway from Jerusalem down to Jericho. This was a highly traveled highway. It was a place for businessmen to go back and forth. You heard that there was an inn along the way that he stayed, probably was well known there. It's the kind of thing that they would do often. And of course, it attracted bandits, robbers, who would be hiding out and waiting for someone to come back, having sold their belongings, and come back with a lot of money. And it was a way for them to, sideline them, waylay them, and beat them, and take whatever they could from them. I'm sure he'd seen it before. I'm sure he worried about that befalling him on more than one occasion. So clearly he saw that the injured man that he saw by the side of the road, he couldn't tell what kind of a man that was. He couldn't interview him and find out if he was worthy of being cared for, or was he a good person at all? Maybe he was one of the bandits himself. He didn't ask those questions. He simply did what he would have wanted someone to do for him. The golden rule. Jesus would talk about that someplace else. Our choice to love indiscriminately, unconditionally, is our spiritual responsibility. We are all called to render aid and support as we can, to speak up for and bind up those who fall by the wayside. Not one of us has the luxury to walk on the other side of the street anymore. Things are coming apart, and the things that are necessary are for good people to stand up and do good things, the right thing, for the right reasons, from the goodness of their heart. We are those people. How was the Samaritan able to do what he did? It says, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He didn't think about it. He didn't rationalize. He didn't draw lots. He didn't look at his watch, assuming he had one, and try to figure out what time it was, how much time did he have, how long is this going to take, and, figure it all in. He took pity on him and he acted from a place of compassion. It was a decision to love first. It was a decision to enter into unconditional love. Not because of who this person was, but because of who he was. He moved from his head to his heart, and he let his heart take the lead. Loving without regard for the type or worthiness of the person we think we are ministering to or giving love to or serving, that impersonal love is still an intimate love, because we don't have to sit down and figure out the qualifications. We just have to know who we are. We just have to know what we're here to do, what we're here to bring. That decision comes first, and then everything else will flow from there. I'm going to invite you now to do this with me, because I want you just for a moment to remember what it feels like to be out of your rational mind and making a decision and moving back into your feeling, into your compassion, into what it feels like in your heart. So 3 breaths in a row. We're going to do it together. Take a deep breath in with me. Do it again. I know you want to stop, but don't. One more. Just focus. Can you feel something moving and stirring? Can you feel a little widening, a little expansion? Maybe you felt it during the meditation when you were also asked to breathe, and you did a little bit different breathing than you do in your daily life. This is a way for you to remember to drop out of your thinking and just get into the feeling nature, to see what opens your heart, what thoughts open your heart, what thoughts constrict, what closes you down. And try to focus on holding ideas that open your heart. Because you see, our polarized political climate seems pervasive, not just in polite conversation about politics, if that's even possible anymore, I don't know. But the divisiveness enters our workplaces, our Facebook and news feeds, our families and extended families, even our homes. As spiritual beings, how do we remain principled and yet loving toward those we believe are just so wrong? Maybe even dangerously wrong. How do we get there? I'll tell you, in ministry leadership, I have learned an extremely hard-earned lesson. As someone in authority and with responsibility for most of my adult life, making the best decisions that I know how to make, that have simply come with the territory I've walked. But my decisions haven't always been agreed with or without fallout in my relationships with others. And through the years, I have found that being right just doesn't cut it. I've found that relationship always trumps being right. Relationship always trumps being right. Yes, I'm using the verb. Relationship always trumps being right. You can make it a bumper sticker, I don't mind. But not instead of doing the right thing, not instead of doing the right thing, only in spite of doing the right thing, relationship still matters. You don't just cut your losses and say, well, they'll wake up someday. We'll get back together when they come around to understanding that I'm right and they're wrong. It's going to be a long time. That's all I have to say. Reaching out and extending a willingness to listen to the hurt or the disagreement, I have found, is the way that I start to come off of the I'm right pillar and start to move back into I care about us. I care about our relationship. How can we do this? To allow a person to be angry with me without being defensive, if I can, to the best of my ability. Being willing to really listen and reconsider my position or amend a decision with while honestly and genuinely loving them the whole time. It gives us an opportunity to reconcile, even if it doesn't go back to the way it was. Relationships are two-sided, three-sided, depending on who's in it. And the point is that all I can do is set the bar lower. I can always lower the threshold. I can always say what's on my heart and trust that somehow that will reach them. Teilhard de Chardin gave us wonderful understanding of love. He says, love alone is capable of uniting living beings in such a way as to complete and fulfill them. For it alone takes them and joins them, but by what is deepest in themselves. Love does that. Love reaches out. Love connects us. Love. And it doesn't come from here. It comes from here. It comes from a spaciousness of the heart. It comes from the pull of what we genuinely value, what really matters to us, what really touches us, what opens our hearts. Likewise, loving those who disagree with us politically or religiously or socially provides a rich, fertile field of possibility for changes of heart to occur within others as well as within ourselves. It enables us to become sensitized to a variety of human reactions and experiences, not just our own and what we think is right. Moving past right and wrong is the place where we find how it is that I can't convince you with my words or my data or my research or my reasons. You're just going to come up with matching ones of your own. What really changes us, what really sensitizes us, humanizes us, is how do we open up and really care deeply that this person that I love or care about thinks differently than me. And rather than writing them off, I start to learn how to get past that, how to understand. Because you see, society, like human beings themselves, don't change by what is thought, but rather by what is deeply felt. Staying open, not closing down or running away, not discounting or arguing, but having hard, respectful conversation with genuine curiosity and a desire to understand. Tell me more about that position, because I don't get any part of it. How is it? I really love you, but I don't get that, so talk to me about it. I want to know, because I need to broaden my view. I've got to see how someone I can love can hold an idea that I don't love. And how can I find a way to do both? Because you see, in these hard, respectful conversations, with genuine curiosity and a desire to understand, it's the opening to real growth, to real change. When hearts change, minds change. No other way. This is the field of unconditional love that Jesus lived and taught us. Jalaluddin Rumi says, out beyond wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. We stop talking. We just love each other. Reverend Bob Lucan shares a story about a gentleman he met in a coffee shop. He says he lived in a small room without air conditioning in one of Florida's many communities for the elderly. He was in poor health. He had little money, and his walker was his only transportation. I met him in a coffee shop. The coffee shop was full, with only one extra chair at his table. I looked over it and caught his eye. He nodded, inviting me to join him. There was a kindness in his eyes and a voice that reminded me of an old folk song, it seemed. Looking up at me with a smile, he said, "Young man, life is good, very good. Every day I meet wonderful people, and I fall in love. Most folks don't think an old guy like me can fall in love. The truth is, I've been doing it for over 80 years, and I couldn't stop if I wanted to. Life is just so good, it makes me smile." He says, being retired gives a person the time they need to really see people's hearts and souls. Once you see who people are under all that cover-up, you just can't help but love them. He finished with this: I make time and I have the energy to love my life and all those who share it with me. You see, I'm a lover. Swami Ramdas says, just as a flower gives out its fragrance to whomsoever approaches or uses it, so love from within us radiates outward towards everybody and manifests as spontaneous service. Our love does the work. Our choice releases the love. That's how we're used. That's how it works. That's why we're here. And that's why we're here now. And so that's how unconditional love works. When you have a willingness to love first, The details will fill themselves in later when you finally meet that person to love. Which of these three do you think was the neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. Choose to love first. God bless you all.